Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. Hope you're having a great day. I am Patricia He Boulay, and I'm so excited that you are joining in today. Tennis, for those who know me, tennis has been a huge part in my life, and I'm very, very thankful for that. I've been in tennis for about 4 decades, and during that time, I was a competitor on the WTA Tour for many, many years. So if you would excuse me, I will be right back. Technical difficulty here is a norm So as I was saying, I was on the tour for 18 years, 16 years, lost count. And my best singles ranking was 26. And my best performances was reaching the quarters at the singles in the US Open and the Du Maurier, which is now Rogers Cup, and double semifinals at the Australian Open and finalists at Indian Wells. Super honored to be selected to compete in 3 Olympics, in Los Angeles, in Barcelona, and Atlanta. And also I was honored to be inducted in the Hall of Fame twice. And my greatest pride and joy are working with my 2 children. Obviously with my two children, but also as a mom coach, and very proud of them that they are attending on a full scholarship at the tennis scholarship at the Ohio State University. And after I retired from the tour, I transitioned into coaching and then took up the high performance, concentrated really into the high performance coaching. And that had been a wonderful journey for me. And which I feel from that coaching journey, I am now transitioning into the last chapter of my tennis journey. And that is a speaker at conferences and at clubs, and just connecting between the tennis parents, players, and the coach together to be the best team that they can be. My tennis journey certainly would not have been possible without the influence of my childhood coach, my dad. And my tennis career couldn't possibly happen without a fantastic team of coaches, especially the patience of my husband, Eve. And if you are familiar with my blog post, I focus a lot about elite mindset. And it's been, and I'm still at it, believe it or not. I was tested as recently as last week. If you had attended my seminar last week, I completely got thrown off guard, had a disturbance, which I completely didn't even expect, lost my balance. And maybe perhaps some of you noticed, some didn't, but I certainly noticed because I'm a big performance-minded person, right? And so I felt so bad, so upset because I didn't handle the situation well, sulking, so this is equivalent that, like, when you go to a tournament, right? You're so excited to go to the tournament, and you are for sure wanting to be the best that you can be. And then all of a sudden you are double faulting and you can't find your strokes and you are just panicking. So that's where I was. And however, so the negative thinking started coming in, right? oh, I can't do this, I'm not good enough. So just very similar of what you might be experiencing after a bad match. Got over the night, through the night, I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I was upset, just motivated, really, just like, I can do this. I'm going to look into it. I am going to reset. And what do I need to do better? So I did my step, one step at a time. And lucky, actually, I feel like lucky for everybody. I didn't give up. So I am, the next day I thought, okay, what can I do better? I'm going to invite some guest speakers that I know personally from the tour with the elite mindset, and to provide information and share and to connect with you. As elite-minded player and competitors, you will go through setbacks, and it's not if, but it's when you get there, how quickly can you bounce back? So this brings us to our topic today. Who better to learn from than from a Pan American Games gold medalist, 2 Grand Slam mixed doubles champions, and 2 times women's doubles finalist. And please join me to welcome Gaby Dabrowski. Gaby, are you there? Hi. How are you? How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for taking the time to join us.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So prior to having you over, I send out emails for players and coaches and parents to send in questions in advance. Very interesting questions. And those are some of them were what I wanted to ask you anyways. How have you been coping with the lockdown isolation period?
Honestly, here in Florida, we've been really, really lucky. Obviously, we have great weather. Where I train, the gym is like sort of partially open. Like you can have like a couple people in there at a time, but we mainly do all our workouts out in the field. We have a big green space where we do everything. So really lucky. Can still play tennis. We've got Sasha Zverev and Hubert Hurkacz and a couple of others practicing pretty much every day. They're still motivated, I guess. But I'm taking a little bit of break from the tennis. I just hit once a week to kind of keep the feel of the racket in my hand. But other than that, I'm enjoying the time off, actually. It's, traveling every single week for 30, 40 weeks out of the year is crazy, as you know. So in a way, it's been nice to be in one place for a while.
Well, I bet that's an extended version of your off season, which is totally unexpected.
Yeah.
I've spoken with other players. They're actually enjoying this time to be with family and to recover, right? Because you're on the road for 9 months, right? And so how do you keep fit? So I understand you're not on the court once a week, and I'm sure our audience is dying to find out what do pros do to keep your fitness maintenance?
Well, I think it'll depend, where you are and what you have access to. So, if I was just staying at home, there are tons of fitness classes online that you can sign up for. I've done a couple of them through the WTA. They have an affiliation with some fitness trainers and yoga instructors. So they're providing us with some classes every week. And also, if you have good weather, going for a run. I always hated running, but now it's like one of the things that I do a lot. And I'm running for longer than I'm used to. So I'm actually improving. And so that's really nice. And then if you do have access to some, weights or TRX or bands, then you can incorporate all those things into your workouts as well, which we do every week. So yeah, it just depends what you've got. But I think if you set a time, see, for me now with not really having a schedule, you have to create a schedule. So I know that I'm going to do my fitness at 11. I know that I'm going to do my schoolwork, after 3 or whatever. If I have different phone calls with player council, then I work around that. So I have to be very regimented. Otherwise, I feel like all this free time will just kind of go to waste, So I want to make sure that I stay disciplined.
Well, absolutely, because you have to keep preparing for when it's time to go back to compete, and you can't just sit at home and twirl your fingers and until like when the tournaments come back and you're like, here I am, type of thing. So while you are not hitting every day, you're still mentally preparing when that time is going to come, and that is going through the fitness. What about nutrition?
Really good. I'm really lucky. I stay with my friends, and David, he loves to cook pretty much every day. So we have homemade dinners almost every single night. So it's very lucky, very healthy, lots of fish, veggies, rice, pasta, even dessert. Like I've been baking a little bit, but nothing crazy, and I'm not overdoing it. Honestly, like considering you have a lot of time at home, I've been eating very well. I try to have some healthy snacks. Like I actually recently discovered that I like prunes.
Watch out, fiber.
So that's something new that I learned, and I have that as a snack, and it's healthier than just loading up on chips or chocolate. So I'm doing quite well for now.
Now, the nutrition part, was that something that you, over the years, that you had learned to be more aware of using food as fuel, or have you always been like that?
Honestly, pretty much always, because my parents always made sure I ate very, very well as a kid. I was the kid at school that had like huge lunches with like soup and sandwiches and snacks, and other kids would be eating like Lunchables, and they would look at my lunch like, what is that? And so I would share my food with them, because they were like, oh, can I have some carrots, or can I have some crackers? Can I have like part of your cucumber? Like, so, and sometimes sometimes I was even like too full, I would just give them my sandwich if I was, too full after. Because sometimes in the thermos, my dad would either put soup or he would put pasta. So days I had pasta, I was full pretty quickly. I had all this food there. So I would say it actually started from a young age, and then that habit has carried on till now. Yeah. So,
so you don't have to make that extra effort to I got to eat properly. So it's just it's in your definitely your upbringing. I would, if it's okay with you, I know I got a whole list of questions already, but there are more. So I'm going to, if it's okay with you, I'm going to open up that Q&A so the audience can maybe put some questions in there. So everybody, I'm going to open up that Q&A, and feel free to send your questions in if you haven't already. All right. So where are you from in Canada?
The most basic question. I am from Ottawa. Yeah.
All right. When did you start playing tennis?
When I was 7. Yeah. So I think a pretty average age of starting.
Yeah. That is a good age. With all the access on the social media, and when I see videos of these 4-year-olds, or I was like, oh my goodness, right? The superstar of these 4 and 5 years old is such a long journey, and as you know so well, anything can happen, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you. I see the little kids on YouTube or on Instagram, and they're doing amazing, but you're just like, oh my God, you have such a long way to go. Like, don't get burned out at the age of 6, please.
So along that line, how did you get into tennis?
I was actually a summer when both of my parents were working. So when I was born, not when I was born, but after my mom was done her mat leave, she had the higher paying job. So my dad actually stayed home with me for 6, almost 7 years, and was like mom. And so it was actually the summer when both of my parents, were working. So I needed kind of a babysitter, I guess. But it was one of my dad's best friends. She came over from Poland with her son, who was 10. So I was 7 and he was 10. And we basically just spent this whole summer together. They stayed with us, and she was trying to teach me Polish and French because she was living in Europe. And at one point, I think me and Christian, who was a 10-year-old, we just kind of got bored of it, and we were like, okay, like we got to go do something fun. And we got some rackets and we went to a park, which was just by my house, like a few-minute walk. And we just tried hitting the ball back and forth, and that's just kind of how it started. And then within, I don't know, a few days or maybe a week or so, there was a man at the park, and he came up to me and he was like, "Where do you take lessons?" And me at 7, I'm just like, I don't know. And so I went home and I told my dad, I was like, "Dad, there's a man with a beard at the park, and he asked me where I take lessons."
Oh my gosh.
My dad was very concerned. He was like, "Oh my goodness, what do you mean?"
Oh yeah.
And so he came the next time we went out there, and the man was there. And so they got to chatting, and the man was just like, "Oh, if you haven't put your daughter into lessons, you should. She has good hand-eye coordination." And my dad didn't even know that we'd really been like trying to play tennis at the park. So then that summer, as I was going back to school, I started taking lessons at the Ottawa Athletic Club. They start when you're 7, like for like 30 minutes a week, then maybe an hour a week, and then it slowly builds over time. But that's how I got into it.
Okay, so does your dad know? Is he tennis? Does he any tennis background in your dad?
No, so nobody in my family at all ever played tennis. Like, no cousins, no grandparents, nobody. And why you might think that is that he might have had a background is because he coached me for a long time. And so when I started getting into tennis and it became more serious, and we were, making a small investment in lessons and clinics and stuff like that, he took it kind of upon himself to teach himself tennis. So he started reading all of the books and all of the magazines and watching all of the videos. And we had then tennis on TV all the time, anytime we could, when there were, live matches. I remember watching Wimbledon when I was like 8, like, oh, and so then we just kind of like got immersed into tennis like that.
Having a dad as a coach myself, it can become quite hairy.
Mm-hmm.
The pressure from both sides. In one of my presentations, I was, talking about, there in our audience today, there are parents who are coaching their kids. What was your takeaway? I know, it's amazing to me because your dad had to self-teach himself. You won the 18th Orange Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I talk to me about the junior years from, when your dad took it, full-time job in helping to develop his little girl. Take me through that journey from your dad to winning Orange Bowl.
Right. Well, okay. That's a few hefty years there. Well, at one point, I guess, as a junior in Canada, we were starting to get told you have to play internationally. You have to look to train internationally because, like, what Ottawa can provide you is not enough for where your potential is. And so then we started looking at tennis academies in Florida because Florida was the place to go. Ended up liking Saddlebrook the most. So then I started coming here with my dad a bit more when I was 13, 14, 15, spending 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. I think even at one point we were maybe here 5 months training. And when I was 15 or 16, there were also some like ITFs in the area in Florida and Alabama. And so you could drive to them and start playing some of the little pro tournaments, like 10,000s or 25,000s. And it just kept escalating. And so, here at Saddlebrook, I would do like kids clinics during the day with 3 or 4 kids on a court and a coach. And then in the afternoon, sometimes there was match play, or sometimes I would come back and train with my dad for an hour or 2, or on a bad day, 3. So we just wouldn't give up. If I wasn't getting something, we just wouldn't give up, and we would keep trying to get it that day. Which I don't always recommend, because sometimes it's better to let it go for that day and try again tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it just kept building over the years. The more videos we watched, the more we would go to the courts and we would try to emulate something. The more we would watch Martina Hingis play and her smarts, we would try to construct a point that way. Then we were watching Kim Kleisters and her athleticism and trying to cover the court really well, and then trying to use the forehand. But that was something that never really fully worked for me. I always preferred the backhand. And yeah, so we just kept going like that. And like you said, it's very tough to have a parent as a coach. At the same time, I was a pretty stubborn kid. So, I'm sure it wasn't easy on my dad or my mom at that time. I had my own kind of ideas about stuff. And if somebody told me something that didn't quite fit with the vision that I had, I would, be a little hard-headed about stuff. But for sure, it's a big challenge to do both, to be a parent and a coach. It is very hard to separate the two. It's hard to come home after a day of practice or come home after a tournament and completely shut tennis off. I think the parents that have that skill to separate the two, they're in a great position, because then their kid feels that, they're fully supported, their parents are fully committed. But then once tennis is done, then it's time to just be, mom and dad. And then they know that they have the two. And I think in turn, that also helps the kid disidentify with their tennis a little bit. And they can separate the result of a match from who they are. And that's one thing that I struggled with for many years. It was like, oh, if I'm not playing well, if I'm losing a match, that means like I haven't done well, that maybe I failed or I'm a failure. And you start to adopt these identifications with yourself that are actually not true, because it doesn't matter how you play on the tennis court, you can still be an amazing person, a great human, and you can try again tomorrow. And so that's something that took me a long time to learn. But once I have learned it within the last probably 6-7 years or so, slowly getting better at that, my tennis has improved. I generally can be more relaxed on the court. I don't get as nervous as I did. I'm a little bit more brave. I can try new things without worrying about the consequence of making a mistake. So yeah, those are things that my dad, my parents and I, we all learned throughout the years. And it's so hard to know when my mom never played competitive sport, but my dad played other sports competitively. So he had a sort of idea, but they were always team sports. An individual sport mentally is so different, to be out there on your own and trying to figure out what to do when you're having a bad day on court. And so it's definitely a huge learning curve for us, but we have an amazing relationship now. We always chat after matches. If my dad was able to watch like a live stream, sometimes my mom can watch too, but she gets nervous still sometimes. But yeah, so I hope that answers your question.
Well, absolutely. No, it's never easy, but that's such a sacrifice on the family. Mm-hmm. Splitting the family if they're siblings, right? You hear a lot of stories about movement, right?
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. I had a different situation because I was an only child, but I know that if I had a sibling, I probably wouldn't have been able to play tennis because of the sheer, like, it's just so expensive. And if my sibling had wanted to play tennis, then definitely not, But I think it's tough on a parent when you know that one of your kids has like great potential, but your other kid maybe is not so interested in sports. So how do you balance the two, right? Because to be really good at a sport, you have to give it 100%. There's no other way. And so you might feel that the other kid is kind of left behind, when in reality, it's just that trying to be good at sport is such a strange situation and such a rarity that it brings out another side of you, I think, as a parent. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not a parent, so I can't say for sure, but try to make your other kid not feel too bad about it, and try to get them involved, I think, with what you're doing. Maybe bring them to the tournaments if you can, and try to make them feel like they're included and they're supported as well. And whatever endeavors they want to pursue, that you try to pursue those as fully as you do for your kid that's in sport. Looking back, sometimes I wish that, maybe I would have gone to college on a scholarship or something, because I feel that that's, school, I think, is really important too. It gives you a very well-rounded perspective on life, and tennis sometimes doesn't, because you get this tunnel vision. And so you can lose the outside world completely. So I think it's good to have a balance, and I think it can actually benefit the kid that's in a sport to have a sibling that's not. They can do other things together and stay fresh mentally. And so
how, this is a question from our audience. When did you decide that, it's time between the pro, because when you're 17, 18, you come to a crossroads, like, do I go pro or do I go to college? How did you decide which route to take?
For me, it actually happened a little bit earlier. So some of the girls from Ottawa that had gone to college actually had bad experiences. They didn't like their school. They didn't like their coaches. Their coaches were forcing them to play through injuries. So when I was 13, 14, those were the stories that I was hearing. I didn't hear a positive story about a kid going to school on scholarship. Right. So my parents and I kind of were like, okay, well, we're not going to do that. School will always be there. You can go when you're older. Let's focus on tennis. So then when I was like 14, and then I had a couple good junior results, it was like, okay, let's just focus more trying to go pro, and then we'll deal with school later. So then I was just doing my high school online at a little bit of a slower pace, because I didn't have a rush to finish to maybe go to college kind of thing. And yeah, but for most kids, there is, like you said, that very obvious crossroads of what do you do. I mean, I don't think there's like necessarily a very black and white, yes or no, right or wrong answer. It kind of depends what you want to do. But I think if you have any doubt in your mind that you want to be a pro, then you should go to school, because the amount, like you were saying, the amount of sacrifice, the amount of commitment and motivation and self-motivation that it takes to be a pro, especially starting at 18, 19, 20, when you're not even fully developed yet, that's a big task. And now you also see a lot of players that are going into their later 20s are having a lot of success. You can come out of college, or you can play a year or two and then turn pro. And so I think that's the beauty of tennis right now, is you don't need to be that. I mean, if you are that breakout at 16, 17, that's great, but that's not a necessity. You can have a really good career starting at 21, 22, 23, and going later. So it's just, I think that's one thing that's also changed from 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And there's a lot of data out in the last 5 years or so, with the timeline of how long it takes a player to go from starting out to reaching whatever, and also the age, right? So I think on the women's side, it's the late 20s that they are in their prime. Right. So when you come out of college, I mean, you're 22.
Yep.
So, and there's that physical component as well as emotional. I think it's emotional for a female. It's the biggest part. We get emotional. We easily, anyways. That's want to touch about, it is this great question. What has been motivating you to keep up the hard work?
Very good question. Well, I think there are times when I've lost some of the motivation, but I have the right people around me to help me through it. you know, like my parents always have, my friends who know me really well and want me to succeed. Couple of coaches like Andrea Rabzak and here at Saddlebrook, Patrick Dasick. I know I can always reach out to them with my concern, and they'll always be able to kind of pick me up if I need it. That said, I am quite self-motivated as well. I think you have to be to live a professional tennis player's life, especially when you're grinding through like the ITF circuit. See, like for me, I always think it's easier to be motivated when you're playing all the big events because it's like you're there, you've made it. You have your hotel pretty much covered, you get free food, you're playing at beautiful venues, you have crowds coming to watch you. It's not that hard to get motivated for that situation. It's hard to be motivated for the grind that leads up to that point of breaking through. So, you know, those stages of battling through the ITF where you have to pay for your hotel, you have to find good food, maybe you're staying in housing, which is like the most amazing thing ever. Trying to find doubles partners, people that you don't know in different countries that you've never been to. So that's the part that I think you have to, be able to stay very, very motivated, because those tournaments inherently don't give you that, oh, this is great. It's like, I have to really work hard to get through this and try to win these matches on these courts that are maybe a little dangerous. If you're playing on clay somewhere in South America, I played a couple tournaments there and I was like, oh, like this clay's not great, but getting through that makes you stronger. So yeah, it's more of that initial grind that you need to maintain that motivation, because once you start playing the bigger tournaments and where you want to be, it comes a bit more naturally.
I really love that part where you were addressing the grind, because I feel like there are a lot of juniors, a lot of, even top juniors, right? They see, the pro, and they want the goods, but not necessarily putting the work, the tedious, painful work day in and day out. Not every player can afford to bring a coach, and that's the hard part. If you're traveling alone and you go to a tournament, how do you keep, I don't know if you've always had a coach traveling with you, or if there was some part in your career that you were traveling alone. How did you get through that?
Yeah, no, I mean, when I was a junior, my dad was there a lot. And then when I was like maybe 19, 20, he was still traveling with me here and there. But then there came a point also where it was like, we can't really afford this anymore. So let's go see if you can go on your own and see what happens. And then again, struggle for a little while, maybe a year and a half. And then it came to the point, that's actually how I kind of transitioned into doubles, because I couldn't afford a full-time coach. Even though I was, making Grand Slam qualies, like I wasn't far away, I was 200, somewhere floating around there, somewhere between like 180 and maybe 230, something like that. And I really knew that to go to the next level, I needed a coach to be able to bring me there, because I had kind of reached my limit. And even with my dad, we'd reached our limit of like what we could do. And I always wanted to work with somebody who had like tour experience, like maybe was a woman, to try to understand my emotions. Because like you said, I mean, I'm very emotional in general. I think there's some girls who are maybe less emotional than me, but yeah, so so I did it on my own for a while. And even though I felt I grew as a person, being on my own and traveling on my own, being very independent, looking after myself. So I found like the human aspect of myself was growing. The tennis aspect of myself wasn't really growing. And then that's when I kind of transitioned into doubles, because my doubles results, even at ITFs, were quite good. And I knew that I was good in doubles. So I just then tried to figure out a way to kind of tailor the tournaments to maybe playing a few bigger tournaments in doubles, trying to do well, and then trying to make it to the bigger tournaments, play with better partners, gain some respect, And luckily that happened. But there was definitely a moment there where it was like, what do we do? Like, I can't even afford really to travel on my own anymore, you know? So it's yeah, it's really tough, yeah, trying to come up.
Well, I mean, it's such an expensive sport, trying to get a coach, you know, if you're trying to
Yeah.
get like you said earlier, you know, you want to do it right. If you're going to take this professional route, you have to do it right. And that's a team that you need to put together. The coach, the fitness, and some traveling coach, you know, that whole, and not everyone can afford it. And if you're not in the top 80, you are not making enough money to have that luxury. And you really have to you've got to find your passion. And that's a lot of times, that's when you differentiate, right? The average, the wannabe I call, and the one that's really going for it, because you have to put in your dues. And in my time, way back when, it literally takes between an average of 4 years from the start, and if you're still in it, to make it in the top 100. And that's a lot of heartaches and tears that goes into it. Talk to me. Okay, so you touched on eventually how you had to decide doubles, to go with the doubles route. And for our audience, just so you know, when you start out on the ITF tour, correct me again, Gabby, if I'm completely off. I think it's still the same. Let's say you're starting off, and you know, in the singles and doubles. And if you start doing better in the doubles, but then you can't quite make the cut for the singles, that's a hard decision to make, because you have to let one go if you're making that a full-time job. And that's what happened, right?
Yeah, definitely. So then there were times when I would be going further in a doubles draw and then not being able to make singles qualifying of the following week, and then losing points and ranking drops, and then still trying to chase then a doubles dream, but singles then kind of kept falling, and then it was put on the back burner over several years. It didn't happen right away. Right away, I still was trying to do both. And I would play a lot of tournaments, and I would travel a lot, and I would go from, I remember one time flying from Doha all the way to Monterrey, Mexico. So Doha was a bigger tournament in doubles, and then Mexico was a 250, so an international WTA, where I was in singles qualies, and flight delays, stuck in Dallas, but I was trying, and I was going to play doubles at this 250. So I knew I had doubles, but I so badly wanted to play singles. And like everybody else probably would have pulled out of the singles, because to try to make it, literally landing a few hours before your match and trying to go play is crazy. But I always have wanted to still try to maintain the singles as best as I could. It just wasn't possible a lot of the time. And it was actually, that was one of the tournaments that I won in doubles. So it was like I think it was my second tournament win ever for doubles, which was amazing. Yeah, so it's like, what do you do? And I just had to kind of swallow my ego in some moments, swallow my pride, because my ego really still wants to be good in singles. You know, that's just how it is as a tennis player. You don't grow up thinking, oh, I'm going to be a doubles specialist. It doesn't really, you know, you want to be a great singles player and maybe a great doubles player at the same time, but it's not that doubles is taking precedence over singles. And so I really had to kind of adjust my mindset and be like, well, if I want to play tennis and I want to play all these big, beautiful tennis tournaments, I'm going to have to give up the singles dream a little bit or a lot, and just commit to finding my way in doubles. And I did do that. I still wish I could play more singles. I think I have a bit more in me.
Yeah, but you know what? And the ranking system, the point is set up, it's impossible. It's impossible. So, and I really feel like, you know, moving in your rocking chair, in your 80s, in your rocking chair, you could look back with so proud of your effort, right? There will be no regrets, because you tried. You really tried to get the singles. And that leads us to the doubles, a Grand Slam doubles. I'm sure the audience is just, I'm saving that for the last 5 minutes. share your emotions, because you know most people are coming on the tour, they want to get in the Grand Slam, right? They want to get there a few rounds, but then you actually, you know, you won the mixed doubles. So share that feeling, what it was like.
Yeah, it's very cool. There's like kind of a culmination of things that just like come together all at the same time. But I would actually say I felt it more even in when I won my second title with Pavic than I did in the first than when I did at French Open the year before. And that's because so how it kind of is for me sometimes in mixed doubles is I've noticed I'll play really, really well up until the finals. And all our rounds, quarters, semis, even if they're close matches, I'll play really well, like loose, brave, and then the finals will come. And if you I don't know if you remember, if anybody's watched the matches, but like the first set of when I played with Rohan at French, we were both, I think, really nervous, and it showed. And then, you know, you finally settle into the match, but then you battle. And at Australian Open a year after with Pavic, sort of the same thing happened. I mean, I remember playing some of the best tennis I've ever played up until that final, like returning a guy's serve for a winner, like literally just not thinking and playing amazing. And then again, the first set in that final was a little tight, you know, a little choky. So, but what I loved about that match is the way that we got through it and the way that we ended up finishing the match. You know, Pavic, when we were down match point in the super tiebreaker, hit 2 aces. And then to win the match, you know, I hit a forehand winner return. And that was a shot that like I'd been working on for so many years and always struggled with under pressure. And so it was that moment of like, oh yes, like in the highest stakes moment that I've experienced so far, I made that shot. And so then that gave me some more belief in it and myself. And I think the only way that you can, you know, start to really trust yourself is when you're put in those situations and you just decide, I'm going to trust and see what happens, and you learn from it, and then you can keep building. And so that's why I love that second final more, is just I found I handled it better than the first time. Even though we won the first time, I felt in the end the other team got more nervous, you know? Yeah. So then we won the match. But then the second time, the other team, like, then I was actually playing against Rohan and Timea Babos, who's one of the best doubles players in the world. And she was really, like, they both played, I thought, like, very well the whole time. So it was nice to come out on top when the other team is playing well. That means you played better, you know? They didn't give it to you. You really took it, and we took it. And so I was proud of that. Yeah, so that's...
That gave me goosebumps just reliving, you know, because we can appreciate, like you were saying, you worked on this forehand forever, right? At that moment hit and you're able to deliver, I mean, the satisfaction is unbelievable. Yeah. Cute question for you from an audience. Do you get to keep the big trophy?
No, no, we don't. We get a small version.
A small version, okay.
Yeah, it's still great. It's still great. I mean, I can't imagine trying to transport the big one or even having it mailed. That's happened a few times where some tournaments will mail the trophy to you and the trophy will break along the way. So it's actually nicer to have a smaller version that you can keep with you and so nothing happens to it.
Right. So you the moment you with that big trophy is on court, you get to hold it with your partner and then bye-bye. Is that right?
Yeah. You might be able to, I don't know if we took some photos after with it, but it's pretty much bye-bye. Yeah.
Well, listen, Gaby, the time has come for us to end here. It's been fabulous having you. Thank you so much for your lovely stories. And I'm sure our audience gets a lot from your tennis journey. Best of luck to when the tournament gets started. And if I could have you come back for the second round, that would be totally awesome.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having
Everybody,
me.
yeah, and everybody, that is Gaby Dabrowski. Please tune in when she plays, and I will see everybody next week. I know if you had attended my presentation last week, I had mentioned I will do a weekly webinar on Wednesday, but that obviously changed, mainly because after the presentation, I got emails from coaches where the parents were kind of upset that they really wanted to be there live. Well, they was recording, but anyhow, so I changed it now to every Saturday at 11 a.m. and Gaby kicked off our Saturday morning, and continuing into the future, every Saturday we will have different speakers and sometimes myself with presentation or with players and coaches. And next Saturday, we will have Wimbledon semifinalist, ranked number 19 on the WTA, Allison Risk with us. A link, an email will be sent out, so please look out for that. I know we've gone over a few minutes, and thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.